You notice it as soon as you enter. The room feels calm, but not warm. Conversations move easily. People smile at the right moments. Nothing feels tense or forced. Everything works the way it should. And yet, something feels missing, like a sound you expect but never hear. The empty one is already there. They are not quiet in an awkward way. They speak when spoken to. They answer clearly. Their tone is steady. They listen without drifting away. If you didn't know better, you would say they are present. But nothing sticks to them. Words land and slide off without leaving a mark. Someone shares a small mistake, a late reply, a harsh comment they regret. Others react without thinking. A wince, a soft laugh, a quick, "I've done that too." The empty one nods. Their face does not change. There is no tightening, no relief, no discomfort, just understanding without weight. At first, it feels refreshing. No drama, no self-punishment, no long explanations. The empty one doesn't carry shame into the room. They don't lower their voice or rush to justify themselves. They state facts the way you would describe the weather. This happened. That followed. End of story. But slowly, the room begins to respond. People explain themselves more carefully. They add reasons before being asked. They soften their stories. Not because the empty one judges them, but because nothing mirrors them back. Guilt usually signals connection. Here, the signal goes unanswered. Someone apologizes for interrupting. The empty one says it's fine. And it is fine. Completely. There is no trace of offense, no need to repair anything. The moment closes too easily, like a door that never caught on its frame. The room stays polite, calm, functional. But a strange imbalance appears. When guilt leaves one person, it does not disappear. It moves. Others carry it instead. They check themselves. They wonder if they should feel worse. They wonder why they do. Nothing feels wrong enough to name. There is no conflict, no cruelty. The empty one is not cold. They are smooth, clean, unburdened. But as the room continues, you sense it. Guilt is missing, and without it, something human is no longer holding the space together. This is where Jung would quietly step closer, not to accuse, not to explain, just to notice what is missing and ask why it had to go. The empty one does not feel guilty, not in the way others do. When they hurt someone, they see it as an event, not a weight. When they benefit at someone else's expense, they register the outcome, not the cost. There is awareness, but no inner pressure. No voice that says, "You crossed a line," no pull to look back. Jung would not call this strength. He would call it a clue. Guilt does not disappear by accident. It is learned out of the system. Somewhere earlier, guilt became useless or dangerous. Maybe it led to punishment instead of repair. Maybe it brought shame without forgiveness. Maybe it changed nothing except how exposed the person felt. Over time, the mind adapts. It says, "This feeling doesn't help me survive," so it pushes it away. Jung called this the shadow, not a monster, not something evil, just parts of the self that were no longer allowed to stay in the light. Guilt joins other exiled feelings there: regret, tenderness, responsibility for emotional harm. They are not destroyed, they are buried. The empty one still knows the rules. They know what is expected. They know when apologies are usually given. But the signal does not come from inside anymore. So when they apologize, it sounds correct, but hollow. When they say they understand, they mean it intellectually, not emotionally. From the inside, this feels clean, light, efficient. There is no inner noise, no self-attack, no looping thoughts at night. The empty one may even feel proud of this. They may think they have mastered something others struggle with. Jung would be careful here. He would say the shadow always asks to be seen. When guilt is pushed down, it does not vanish. It leaks sideways. It shows up as indifference, as moral blindness, as a quiet sense that other people are too sensitive. In relationships, this creates confusion. Others feel pain, and the empty one does not meet it, not with cruelty, with neutrality. The other person feels unseen, but cannot point to a clear offense. There was no anger, no denial, just absence. Jung would say, "This is the cost." Without guilt, there is no inner signal that something meaningful has happened between two people. No pressure to repair, no reason to slow down. Life becomes smoother, but flatter, cleaner, but thinner. The shadow holds what was removed, and it waits. This is where Nietzsche would start listening differently, not for pain, not for blame, but for certainty, for how easily the empty one explains themselves. In a relationship, guilt usually slows people down. It adds friction. It makes them hesitate before they speak. It makes them check the other person's face. The empty one does none of this. They speak clearly, calmly, as if nothing inside them is pulling in another direction. When a disagreement comes up, they do not raise their voice. They do not dismiss the other person directly. They explain. Their explanation sounds clean, logical, finished. There is no sense that anything is missing. No sense that another version of the story needs space. Nietzsche would notice how convincing this feels, not because it is true, but because it is steady. Certainty has a way of sounding like truth. When one person feels guilt, their words soften. When one person does not, their words harden into something solid. The empty one does not say, "I don't care." They say, "It made sense." They say, "I did what was necessary." They say, "There was no other option." These are not cruel sentences, they are reasonable ones, and that is what makes them powerful. Nietzsche would recognize a shift in morality here. Guilt once acted as a shared signal. It meant, "I care how this landed on you." Without guilt, morality becomes personal. What matters is not impact, but justification. Not feeling, but coherence. In the relationship, this creates a quiet imbalance. One person still feels the after effects. They replay the moment. They feel a weight in their chest. They wonder if something needs repair. The empty one has already moved on, not because they are avoiding the issue, but because to them, the issue is resolved. Over time, the partner begins to adapt. They choose their words more carefully. They bring up concerns with less intensity. They start translating feelings into neutral language. Not because they were asked to, but because emotional language does not land anywhere. Nietzsche would say, this is how values change. Not through arguments, through atmosphere, through the quiet suggestion that feeling too much is unnecessary, that maturity looks like control, that clarity is more important than care. The empty one does not claim moral superiority. They don't need to. Their lack of guilt creates contrast. Next to them, emotion starts to look excessive. Doubt starts to look weak. The standard shifts without being announced. This is not manipulation in the obvious sense. There is no strategy, no plan. There is simply a person who no longer feels the inner pressure to answer emotionally. And that absence reshapes the relationship. Nietzsche would not judge this. He would observe it. A moment where shared morality dissolves and something colder, quieter, and more personal takes its place. This is where Machiavelli would stop listening to explanations and start watching outcomes. He would not ask who feels bad. He would ask who adjusts, who bends, who carries the weight after the moment is over. The empty one moves through work without guilt the same way they move through relationships, calm, direct, unburdened. When a decision causes discomfort for others, they notice it, but they do not absorb it. They see reactions as information, not responsibility. Machiavelli would find this interesting. In professional spaces, guilt often slows people down. It makes them soften decisions. It makes them hesitate before pushing something through. The empty one does not hesitate. They act, then move on. They do not threaten. They do not raise their voice. They explain decisions as necessary, efficient, logical. The tone is steady. The words are clean. When others react emotionally, it only sharpens the contrast. One side is calm. The other is affected. Over time, something subtle happens. People begin to anticipate the empty one's stillness. They prepare themselves before speaking. They bring solutions instead of concerns. They soften objections before they are even raised, not because they were told to, because resistance feels pointless. Machiavelli would say this is how power grows quietly, not through control, but through imbalance. One person feels no guilt about the impact of their actions. Others carry it instead. They worry about timing, about tone, about consequences. The empty one stays clean. Meetings end faster around them. Decisions settle quickly. Compromises appear early, usually from the other side. The empty one does not need to push. Their lack of inner friction does the work for them. This is not cruelty. It is not strategy in the dramatic sense. It is simply how someone moves when nothing pulls them back. Guilt usually acts as a brake. When it is gone, movement feels smooth, and smooth movement looks like confidence. Machiavelli would not moralize this. He would observe the result. Influence accumulates around the person who reacts less. Authority settles around the one who does not flinch. Others begin to follow their rhythm without being asked. And slowly, without announcement, the structure shifts. One person decides, others adapt, not because they agree, but because resistance costs them more than compliance. This is where Machiavelli would nod, not in approval, in recognition. Power does not need intention, it only needs space, and guilt, when absent, creates a lot of space. This is where Hill would step in more carefully, not to praise, not to warn, but to listen to the story the empty one tells about themselves, the story that makes everything feel justified. The empty one does not describe their life as careless. They describe it as clear. They say they are focused, that they don't waste energy on unnecessary emotions, that guilt only slows people down, that success comes from moving forward, not looking back. Hill would recognize this immediately. Belief is doing quiet work here, not belief in others, belief in the self, the kind that turns inner absence into a personal philosophy. The empty one believes they are aligned, that they know what they want, that they are not confused by doubt or self-criticism. When something goes wrong, they do not ask what it says about them, they ask how to fix it, or whether it even matters. Hill would notice how comforting this belief is. Without guilt, the future feels clean. There are no emotional debts, no need to repair, no weight carried from one moment to the next. Each decision stands alone. Each outcome is proof that the system works. In work, this belief sounds like confidence. In relationships, it sounds like honesty. In life, it sounds like strength. The empty one does not see themselves as cold. They see themselves as free. Hill would be careful here. He knew how powerful belief can be when it is repeated often enough. When a person tells themselves the same story long enough, it stops sounding like a choice and starts sounding like truth. The empty one believes they are immune to manipulation, that they cannot be controlled by emotion, that they are operating on a higher level. This belief protects them. It gives meaning to the absence inside. It turns a missing signal into an advantage. Others feel this confidence. They sense certainty. They hear conviction. And they often mistake it for insight. The empty one's belief spreads quietly. not as advice. As example, this is how you survive. This is how you win. This is how you stay clean. Hill would not deny the results. The empty one often moves faster. They take risks without hesitation. They recover quickly. They are not slowed by regret. In a world that rewards momentum, this looks like success. But Hill would also notice what belief is replacing. Guilt once acted as a checkpoint, a pause, a moment to look back and ask what was lost. Without it, belief fills the gap. Forward motion becomes the only value. The empty one feels certain that they are on the right path, certain that doubt is weakness, certain that stopping would be a mistake. And certainty, once established, rarely questions itself. Hill would leave the observation there, not to judge, not to teach, just to note how belief can turn emotional absence into a personal myth, a story strong enough to carry someone very far, and quiet enough to never be questioned. Until the next observation.